Hello, everyone. So we're here with Dr. Heidi Pearson. Thank you so much, Heidi, for doing this. Professor Heidi, Heidi is a professor at the University of Alaska Southeast in Juneau, and conducts most of her research in marine mammals and also teaches some marine biology courses at the university. Our main focus of research are in behavior ecology and conservation of marine mammals, with a big or a good focus on sea otters in Alaska, on their foraging and mating strategies, also with the dusky dolphins on their social behavior, and a lot between the convergence or the social convergence between dolphins and the great apes, apes, and of course humpback whales in Alaska and in other places in the world, and lately focusing a lot as well on the blue carbon program that we'll talk about a little bit later, and how whales can mitigate climate change. So, hi Heidi again. Oh, and besides that, I must say, Heidi is my supervisor on my PhD. So it's a pleasure to interview her as a researcher, but also, of course, to have you as my supervisor. And I hope I'm not that boring as a student.
Joanna, you're
doing my
wonderful. Thank you so much.
So, Heidi, do you want to tell us a little bit about your different working experience all over the world? Because you've conducted your PhD in the state, university in the States, but Texas A&M University, but your field work was done in New Zealand, and you've worked in Norway, you've worked in Portugal, you've done other places in the world. How is it to work with different species of marine mammals in these different places, like Europe, different from New Zealand, different from how was this experience so far?
No, I just feel really lucky, mostly, to have the opportunity to study these incredible animals all over the world and to work with incredible people and groups like yourself and AIMM. I just, first of all, feel very, very blessed and fortunate that I've had this career path so far. And you know, every place is different. And my first marine mammal research experience, actually thinking back, was after I graduated with my undergrad degree from Duke University. I was a volunteer intern on a dolphin project in Zanzibar, which was really exciting, you know, just graduating from college a few months out and got to work with the team there. And
what was the species?
It was bottlenose dolphins and the humpback dolphins.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah. And from there, I've done work in Alaska. So as part of my master's work at Texas A&M, I studied sea otters in Prince William Sound, which was my first time to Alaska, and you know, got to know Alaska. And obviously, then I came back. It's probably 10 years later that I moved back here for this position. But, you know, as you mentioned, I've also been fortunate to work in New Zealand with my PhD advisor, Bernd Versig, and the great team of people there. And that's probably my favorite place to work. I mean, Portugal, of course, is up there.
You can't say that you don't like Portugal.
No, it is truly. But, you know, New Zealand is very special with Kaikoura, as you know. Mm-hmm. And I did my PhD research data collection in Admiralty Bay on the north part of the South Island, which is a very special place. But then here, you know, I'm sitting in my office here at UAS in Juneau and looking out onto the ocean. And, you know, we have mountains and fjords and glaciers and very, very rich marine life. So Southeast Alaska is also a pretty good place to study marine mammals.
It is a very good one. So do you want to tell us a little bit about your project there, for example, with the sea otters? It's usually animals that there's a little bit less research done on them, or we hear more about the dolphins and the whales, but the sea otters are quite important and cool. So do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. You know, sea otters, they're so ecologically important. You know, as you know, they're a keystone species. They provide a lot of ecosystem services for us. And, you know, they're restricted to the North Pacific. And so maybe that's why they don't have as broad of a reach. It's kind of funny because my former graduate student now, Nicole LaRoche, she goes to the Society for Marine Mammalogy meetings, and she always feels like, oh, you know, everyone there is a whale and a dolphin person, and I'm here with my sea otter work. But they are so important. And, you know, I did my master's work on sea otters, and they're a really great marine mammal species to study, especially for behavior, because they don't die for that long. They come up to the surface to feed. So you just get a lot of time to actually see them.
Yeah.
It's unusual for most marine mammals.
Yeah. So they spend quite a lot of time at surface. And
Yeah. And so my master's work, you know, quite a few years ago now, was focused on territorial male behavior and their mating and reproductive behavior. And actually, I have a book chapter coming out on that with Randy Davis, who's my master's advisor. There's a book coming out in the ethology series that Baron Versick is the series editor. And so the sea otter and polar bear book is coming out very soon.
Very good to know.
Yeah. And then my current work, though, is focused on the range expansion of sea otters in Southeast Alaska, which is a really interesting ecological story, but it's also created a very heated conflict with shell fisheries and commercial fisheries here in Southeast, because sea otters, they eat a lot, you know, and they like to eat a lot of the same things that humans are going after. And so the larger project is to look at the ecological and human impacts of sea otter recolonization. And my focus has been on foraging ecology through my master's student, Nicole, who I mentioned. And then I also had a postdoc who developed a system to measure surface canopy kelp from NASA Landsat satellite images.
Wow.
And so through that, we're looking at how sea otters have affected kelp forest growth over the past 30 years.
Oh, wow.
And so that's pretty exciting to use that new technology to examine that larger scale question.
Yeah. Do you have any like experience that you want to share that you had at the field or at the field station where you guys have like the little field house, right, on the where the sea otters are, and any episodes that was out of the normal that you want to share, like field work experiences, unexpected?
Yeah, well, gosh, that's, you know, there's always so many, but then when you have to think of a particular one, so our field camp for this current project was down on Prince of Wales Island, which is south of here. It's actually the third largest island in the US.
Right.
And we had, so part of our funding was through the Earthwatch program. Mm-hmm. And for part of that, one year we had a film crew that Earthwatch sent out because they wanted to film our work for advertising purposes and so forth. And so it's always fun and interesting to have different people, you know, as part of your field team. Actually, as I'm talking, I did think of a really good example. So not the field house, but out in the field. Yeah. And so our very first week of the very first field season, my student Nicole and I were developing the protocol and trying to find sites. And so her method was to set up an observation station on land, you know, on the rocky shoreline, and use a high-powered telescope to look at sea otter foraging behavior. And so we had a larger vessel, maybe like a 30-foot vessel. And then to get to shore, we had to use this little inflatable dinghy. And so it was quite the experience the first time with the two of us getting the dinghy into the water and then getting all of our gear in there and then ourselves and then rowing to shore. And anyway, we didn't flip it or anything, but we were quite the sight. It got better after that first time.
Yeah. Those are always good experiences, right? Like the ones that that sort of reminded me when you mentioned the dinghy. Our I think it was the first time you came to Portugal that we had that little vessel of like 4 meters.
Yeah.
And I don't know how we didn't flip it either, but
it was. And we were pretty far out. Remember, it was
very far out. Yeah.
And like for a while, we couldn't even really see around us, and we were just in this little, this little inflatable boat.
We were in a really like 4 meters boat. I think 4 or 5 meters boat. It was really small, and we had all this equipment, and it was 4 of us in the boat. So the skipper and Andre were in the back, and you and I were in the front. And oh God, they suffered a little bit because we were, I think the longest we did in that tiny boat where we could barely move because we had all the pelican cases and the equipment in the front in such a small place. And yeah, but I think the longest we did was like 12 or 13 hours in that boat. I think that was in that tiny one. So I think that was our longest day. And yeah, I thought the captain was gonna, sort of kill us and say, I don't want to work with these mad scientists anymore. Because obviously for him was a completely different experience and the first time experience as well. But I must say he loved it and he still talks about it. So,
oh, really?
Yeah,
oh, that's
but
so
with
good.
happiness. So he actually liked it very much. Yeah.
Good,
so
good.
And what about like your new and exciting project of the blue carbon and tell us about this. How can whales mitigate climate change if they can or not? So that's like something that a lot of people still don't know about. But do you want to explain a little bit about it?
Yeah, it's a really exciting idea and a field to be a part of. And so blue carbon just generally refers to the natural ways that the marine environment can trap and store carbon, because the ocean is naturally a huge carbon sink. But now we're starting to look at the role that marine vertebrates might play in storing and sequestering carbon. And so I first found out about this topic maybe 7 or 8 years ago. There were some papers that were published, and it just was intriguing to me because it combined, marine conservation and climate change. So, can protecting whales and other marine life obviously help to benefit them through their conservation, but also can it serve as a climate change mitigation strategy because marine vertebrates can naturally trap carbon or stimulate processes that can trap carbon. And so I'm looking at the role of whales in blue carbon. And one of the things I'm looking at is called the whale pump. And this is a hypothesis that was developed by a colleague of mine, Joe Roman, about 10 or 11 years ago now, which essentially looks at how whales, they dive deep to feed, and then they come to the surface to recover from their dives, they relax and they defecate or they poop. And they release these they're called fecal plumes. And these fecal plumes are rich in nutrients that are important for phytoplankton. So essentially, these whale fecal plumes can act like fertilizers and stimulate phytoplankton growth, which of course builds the bottom of the food web, which is important ecologically, but also phytoplankton absorb carbon dioxide and they can serve as a way to trap carbon. And so that's one of the things I'm looking at here in Southeast Alaska. And I've also collaborated with colleagues in Norway and Iceland on this issue as well. And I was also recently involved in a special workshop of the International Whaling Commission, looking at broadly the ecological role of cetaceans in ecosystem functioning, but specifically looking at some of these blue carbon aspects. So it's a study that we're starting to learn more about. We need a lot more research, but if we can get the needed research and try to quantify, how much carbon can these whales trap and help to sequester, then that's when we can start to make the link to policy. And so again, marine conservation policy could also then be wrapped up with climate change mitigation policy, which I think is really exciting.
Yeah, definitely. Super, super exciting, obviously. And do you think that, well, assuming that they do capture quite a lot of carbon, which we think they do, right? Do you think once that's quite solid scientific information, do you think that's going to help people to see whales in a different way, as in like protect whales more because they're quite important in the ecosystem in terms of climate change? Or do you think that's not going to have any impact over people's perspective?
I think it will. If we get the needed science, and there's already been some great science, but we need more. I think that it's an idea that the public latches onto. Whenever I describe it to members of the public, they think it's pretty cool. And I know a lot of non-governmental organizations, conservation organizations, are also quite attracted to the idea as well. It is still an idea in its infancy, so we need to make sure that we don't get the policy too much ahead of the science, but we know that they contribute something to trapping and storing carbon. It's just how much. And the other thing is, we know there's some great papers out by Andy Pershing, for example, which compare the amount of carbon stored in cetacean bodies, living bodies, and also their carcasses, and the amount of carbon that was stored and sequestered pre-whaling, pre-commercial whaling, was obviously orders of magnitude higher than we have now. And so if we can understand their contribution and then use that in conservation to start to rebuild their stocks, I think it could be very good for the environment and for people that care about these whales too.
Yeah. I think it certainly will have some sort of impact on when it comes to whale conservation as well. The fact that they do play a big role, if they do end up playing a big role in this climate change or carbon storage situation. Yeah. So, and that's been done. You've been collaborating with the people from the States, I suppose, and you said Norway and Iceland. Is that right? Okay, so what are the species that you are using most to is it the humpbacks, or you're using other species?
Yeah, mostly humpbacks, because they're literally like right here out my window in Juneau. And so we're looking at this in humpbacks, but globally, looking at carbon stores in cetacean bodies, that's been done on all of the great whale species, which are the mysticetes plus the sperm whale. So essentially the whales that were targeted for commercial whaling. And there's also some work starting to be done more on small cetaceans too, which I know we've talked about collecting poo in Portugal from the common dolphins. So I think that small cetaceans have a role to play as well, but they just haven't been looked at in quite as much depth as the larger cetaceans.
Right. Yeah. Well, to be fair, it's easy to catch the whale poop than it is the dolphin, because the dolphin dissipates quite fast, while the whales just leave a really big mass of orange things at the surface. So it makes it slightly easier, I think. But I think we'll manage at some point to collect the dolphin's poo for sure. And also the other project that you've been quite involved lately, it's on the dolphin tagging, now that you moved to the dolphins, right? So do you want to tell us about what's this dolphin tagging?
Yeah. So
different type of tagging.
So this is a project I've been working on with colleagues in Australia and New Zealand since 2013, I think. Yeah. And what we've done is we've developed a short-term suction cup tag for small cetaceans. We've deployed it successfully on dusky dolphins in New Zealand. And it has a time depth recorder, and the new thing that this tag has that other tags currently don't have for small cetaceans is a video camera. And then of course we have VHF and satellite transmitters to track it and then to retrieve it as well. And yeah, so we have a couple of papers out on that based on our work in New Zealand. We were first of all just extremely excited the first time we got the tag on a dusky dolphin, and then got it back, and then actually got data, and then got usable data. So all of those things, we got some really nice data on mom-calf behavior from the duskies in Kaikoura, and we're currently working to redesign it so that it's smaller, and so it has a better video camera, and so that it will stay on the dolphins for longer.
Right.
And I have bits and pieces of tags all over my office here. So this is part of our original one. The camera is off, it would sit on the top here, but it's this float that floats to the surface when it comes off the animal. And then this is one of the suction cups that we use.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been a really fun project, and we hope to go to the field within the next year with our new model.
Yeah, and so how many attempts did you have until you actually got the good data to use?
Oh my gosh, many.
Number.
I mean, we spent our entire first season, I mean, which was maybe 4 weeks, pretty much failing, you know, didn't work. And then each night we'd go back. My husband, Chris, was instrumental in this with all the tools and the designing on the fly. And then finally, our last day of our first season, we got it to stick. This wasn't with the camera though. Oh my gosh, we were just so happy, and it stayed on for 6 hours. And that was quite the adventure because, as you know, duskies move offshore to feed at night. Yeah. And it was around 4 o'clock, and we didn't have our tag back. We had lost our dolphin, and the seas, of course, were picking up, and we're in this little boat, you know. And I didn't think we were going to find the tag. And I was listening on, on the headphones for the VHF ping. And then by some stroke of luck, I got a really, really, really faint ping. And then we were able to retrieve it. And so that was our first dive data for the duskies.
That was very exciting. Yeah. For you. I imagine. Yeah. Nice. So hopefully, we'll manage to get those tags even smaller and to stay longer, I think, right? That's also, and also slightly, well, I guess I guess if you manage to put it in a dusky, with other species will be much easier, I would say, because if there's animals that do move fast and jump a lot and splash a lot, are certainly the duskies. And that do all those acrobatic leaps and all that. So a lot of behaviors that could clearly just really make the tag go away very easily. Yeah. So having it for 6 hours, it's still quite impressive and really, really good, I think. So yeah, that's nice. So, and now a little bit more about the work that you started, and then somehow I'm following your steps, and that's why you're my advisor, which has to do with the dolphins and this convergent evolution with the great apes. So with the chimps and bonobos, and for the ones that don't know what a great ape is. So do you want to tell us how similar do you think these animals are, and in what aspects are they similar?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and thank you for bringing this up, because this is something that is really a main interest of mine, and I'm really glad that we're exploring this further through your work. But in Alaska, I don't get a lot of time to work on this issue, so it's fun to talk about it. But yeah, you know, dolphins and great apes have many similarities. We call it social convergence. And so first of all, they both have large relative brain sizes. They have other indicators of complex cognition. They have complex societies. You know, they have fission-fusion dynamics. They form long-term bonds. They have very dynamic grouping patterns, and they just form these complex societies. And, you know, they do cooperative foraging. In some cases, they use tools, you know, in the case of the bottlenose dolphins in Shark Bay, for example. And there's other similarities as well, but really it hinges on this complex cognition, large brain sizes, which then feeds into their complex societies, which is pretty remarkable, because the last common ancestor between cetaceans and primates was 95 million years ago. So they have somehow independently evolved these similar brain and social traits.
Yeah, and it's a super exciting topic for sure. And because we're focusing our study a lot in the maternal strategies, and that's very interesting to see that it's some of the things are really similar. And it might be also similar to other groups of mammals, and that's very, very interesting. Do you think this might be a little bit personal, but do you think that since you become a mom, did that change a little bit your perspective when studying the mother-calf approach and relation in dolphins or in the apes as well?
Yeah. I think it's worked both ways. I think because I have been interested in mother-calf or maternal strategies, I think that's actually helped me to become a better human mother. And then also, for sure, since I've become a mom to Maya, she's almost 2, I do think about things differently. You know, it's such a strong bond between mother and offspring. And what I think a lot about actually is cost of transport. You know, so how much energy does it cost a mom to move, either when she's pregnant or when she's carrying that offspring, or when that offspring is traveling beside her? So I'm living all these things that I've read about with primates, other primates especially, and with dolphins, because I think, yeah, you know, I'm using a lot more energy. I'm eating things different. You know, I'm traveling more slowly, and this is shaping my grouping patterns. I think about all that, and it's been really neat to see how it's become intertwined.
Yeah. And it was very interesting for me as well, although I'm not a mother, but when I started, and we talked about this, but when I started our work on the maternal strategies of the common dolphins, that was a moment where my friends all got pregnant and all got their babies. And so it was really interesting, because I was like, you know, studying the dolphins and reading a little bit about the primates, and then I would see the behaviors that they were having and how they changed as well in all those aspects that you've mentioned. And it's very interesting, you know, although we don't work with humans, it brings you to your, I think, to your most I don't know, like the purpose of life, right? We're here to breed, so
yeah, right,
right? So it's kind of like it takes you back a little bit to that, and it's very interesting. It's very interesting to compare that and to sort of see that. And it was, yeah, it makes it even more interesting when we're looking. It makes us think when we're looking at the dolphins, some of the things that, you know, might be happening or not, and the other way around. And I actually say this to my friends quite a lot, you know, because sometimes, and nowadays, women need to be this sort of super creature, superwoman, super mom, and that, you know, yes, okay, that's all good. But don't forget that, you know, we're social creatures, and there's like, it literally takes a village to raise a child. So don't forget your village, in the sense of your friends, your family, your closest relatives, because certainly, you know, it all, that sentence really make a trigger, like, yeah, I mean, of course, it does take, not just because a child is you know, yeah, there's a lot of work, but because you should share that work with your group, with your family, with your structure, and that's and that's what makes us as well so unique, and in the social aspect that it's so important for us humans, I think. Would you agree with that? Or no?
Oh yeah, everything. Yeah, no, you've hit it just right, Joanna. Yeah, I think, you know, humans we're animals too, and like you said, being a parent kind of brings you back to those biological roots, because there's commonalities across, you know, mammals.
Of course. Yeah, it's a very, very interesting topic for sure. So, in what brought you to, like, okay, you started when you finished your graduation, you went to Zanzibar and got lucky to do that experience with the dolphins there. But what pulled you to this field, to the marine mammal field? Like, what was the source or the cause of it?
Yeah, well, I guess, you know, as a kid, like many of us in the field, I was always fascinated by animals, and in particular behavior and conservation. I always had and still have kind of feel a sense of responsibility for wildlife conservation. And, you know, the group of animals that first piqued my interest were primates. And I studied lemur behavior when I was an undergrad at Duke University at the Primate Center. But then had some experience at the Duke Marine Lab. I under Andy Reid for an independent study project as an undergrad, and so got interested in dolphin and marine mammal behavior. And then, you know, so I finished undergrad and decided I want to further my education to get the job I want, and really thought long and hard, do I want to go the primate route or the marine mammal route? The commonality between those was interested in complex behavior and social animals, and you know, cognitive complexity. And honestly, what kind of pushed me to the marine mammal side was that I wanted to do field work. And so I figured if I was doing field work on wild primates, I would always be traveling to other countries outside of the US. We don't have any wild primates here, but we have so much coastline and abundant marine mammal life. And so in the end, it was kind of a practical decision that I could still be based in the US and study marine mammals. But of course, I've studied marine mammals around the world, but I can still be based here and have a local field site.
Yeah, true, for sure. And that's also very important, right? For some people, it might not be, but for others, it really is. And yeah, I suppose that's a very good thought decision, wise decision as well. Okay, and all right. So now another personal question. How do you feel that, how is it for you to be a woman in this field of science, in the marine mammal science or science in general? How is it for you? Do you find it particularly difficult? Do you think how's the experience, or do you think it's all natural and normal?
Yeah, you know, and I think a lot about that too. I think more so now that I am a mother, and I can't say I've had any huge like setbacks or obstacles, you know, just kind of the normal. It's really hard to be a marine mammal scientist and kind of make your way up through all the steps. But I think I've had some really great female role models, not just in the marine sciences, but when I was a high school student, I took a marine biology class in Des Moines, Iowa, you know, landlocked state. And I had a really amazing marine biology teacher who had her PhD, Dr. Karen Stiles. And so she was my first scientific, you know, female role model. I had some great role models in college and after college. And so I guess you know, very successful woman at the university that had PhDs and so forth, and that really mentored me and got a chance to know me and help to kind of cultivate my scientific mind and career. So I think I've been lucky in that respect. But you know, I didn't have a child until late in life. And I think you never know, but I was able to get my career, you know, get my PhD, come to the university, actually get tenure and promotion. And then I had Maya. And so I already had a stable career under my feet when I had a child, and was actually able to take a year off with Maya. And I feel very, very fortunate for that. Of course, there's also some drawbacks about having a child later in life. But I think had I had a child earlier, I think it would have been more difficult to get to where I am, you know, because it's just logistically challenging to have a little baby, and you need money, you know, for daycare and all the rest. And I didn't necessarily plan to have a child at this point in my life. It's just kind of how it worked out. And I think knock on wood, it's worked out pretty well, but it's hard. It's hard for women, you know, in the sciences and generally, especially in the marine sciences, because we do a lot of field work. And how do you do that with a little baby, you know? And maybe you don't want to leave your baby for field work, but then you fall behind. And then we have this, at the university level anyway, we're measured by our publications and grants, and that takes time. And it's just this whole, you know, work-life balance. I think the US is getting better at it. In Europe, I think you guys have always been better at work-life balance. You know, from the outside perspective, and from my time in Norway, you know, it seems like the European system is a little bit more family friendly, and I think the US is coming around, but it's definitely not easy.
Okay, no, but you are a role model on that, in that aspect. I think you are a role model in a lot of aspects, but in that too, because I mean, of course there's constraints, but I mean, you when was it? 2019, December 2019. You flew with your 3-month child from Juneau to Barcelona. You know, like how many flights was that? It was like crazy. I remember you telling me, and I was just like, "Yay! I have a really good, a really cool mom." That, you know, of course, it might not always be possible, but while you can, you're doing it, and that's quite impressive as well. And it's a way of dealing with the field work, with the being present in the conferences and establishing your connections and reinforcing them, and at the same moment being capable of being a mom and support. Of course, at this time she's very how do you call that, well, you can carry her around everywhere.
Portable.
Portable, that's the word. Yeah, portable. Yes, it makes things a little bit easier, but yes, so it's still quite impressive. Yeah. So
just to follow up, I have to give credit to my amazing husband, Chris,
True,
too, who
true.
you know, and I couldn't do it. He's my village, essentially. I couldn't do it without a really strong, supporting spouse. And that's really key,
Yeah,
you know, to have a partnership and when you're trying to work and raise a child.
Yeah, definitely. Chris is very supportive for sure. So do you want to share with us like your best field experience, like a moment that you really recall?
Oh God, you know, there's a lot over
Like
the
one
years.
that really marked you somehow?
Yeah, gosh.
By the positive or the negative side of it.
Yeah, well, I guess, I mean, there's a lot that I could share. I guess one of them that stands out is back to the dusky dolphin tagging off Kaikoura. When it probably goes back to that first 6-hour deployment, you know, the last day of our field season that we got that tag on, and I just felt kind of a huge sense of relief, you know, because it was a grant funded project. So, okay, we actually did something and we're getting some new data from the species. You know, at the time, you know, the tag just had the TDR, but we got something, you know, we got good data. And for me, I was using a new technology that I had never used. And so that was also a personal triumph, you know, that this new technology that we developed was working. And just, I remember that day, it was in January, which of course is summer in New Zealand, and it was a sunny day, and it was a great group of dolphins, you know, one of the big, large mixed sex groups of duskies, that's like 200 to 300. And it was just a lot of fun to, at that time, you know, during those 6 hours, our focus was on mostly just staying and trying to keep track of our tagged dolphin. But it was, yeah, I guess that was kind of something that I had never thought I would do, you know, and we were able to do it, and then hopefully we'll continue to refine that technology.
Yeah, for sure. That's a good one. And then maybe not so happy, like a moment where you were very frustrated. Well, I suppose in that experience for the 4 weeks you were very frustrated for not getting it.
Yeah.
But then it turns out well. But do you have any like a moment that it's maybe not so happy in a situation that made you sad or made you frustrated or something like that in the field?
Yeah, and I think it's important that we talk about, because these not so great experiences, because there are a lot of them, to be honest, and marine mammal field work, it can be highly frustrating, as you know, but oftentimes when we write our results, or you know, you see it in documentaries, it's just the highlights of, people think everything is successful all the time, but that's not true. You have to fail a lot, I think, to be successful. And I'm getting better, I think, about trying to be less hard on myself, you know, with, because I always have a drive to make the most of the data and get, you know, as much data and the best data I can, but sometimes it doesn't always work out with wild animals, of course, and weather. Well, gosh, I can think about a terrifying moment actually here in Juneau a few years ago. We were out, I had a student I was working with, and we were doing seawater sampling. So, and I was out, we were on our boat, a Boston whaler, and we weren't even doing marine mammal work that day. We were just out to get her seawater sample. She was measuring iron. And we were in an area called Berners Bay. It's like 30 miles north of Juneau. Anyway, a great day, you know, great weather, calm, in the summertime. And she was on the bow of the boat collecting her water, and I'm you know, manning the helm, and I look in the cabin, and there's water. First of all, I saw our lunch bags floating.
Oh,
in the cabin. It's like, our lunch bag shouldn't be floating, and we had water coming in the boat. The boat was taking on water.
Oh,
I had no idea why. It was taking on water, and then it went through, was taking on water on the sides. And so immediately she pulled up all her gear. We all put our life vests on. we just hightailed it back to the dock, but it was like a 30-minute ride. Meanwhile, water is coming in the boat, and I think we had 4 people total on the boat. 2 people were using the hand bilges to bilge out water. Water keeps coming in. Melissa, my student's on the radio with the Coast Guard, telling them, you know, we're taking on water, and so they're talking with us the whole time through. And my heart was just racing. It was the most terrifying moment I've had on a boat. And we made it back. We made it back to the dock. And after we got back, we realized there was another boat, I think it was an Alaska Department of Fish and Game boat, that saw we were in distress, heard it on the radio, and they were following behind us as a safety measure.
Nice.
So people were looking out for us. And so we got, we ended up all fine. We got the boat out of the water, and it turns out it was something fairly simple, like there was a loose connection somewhere in the lines that brought the water in. But man,
that's a scary moment for sure, especially when you were with the students, right? Because they sometimes might not be so experienced in the field, or and I can't imagine that must have been like really, really stressful. Yeah, for sure. I didn't know about that story. That's a good one. It's a very scary one, and it's a reminder for everybody to, you know, we always say every time we go out, safety comes first. But we do sometimes forget a little bit about that, and for sure, hearing stories like this will always like call our attention how important it is to, know the boat, know your stuff, know how to call the emergency, other boats around, and ask for help. Yeah, definitely. All right. Okay, I have like 2 more questions. One is that if you have any advice for students that want to get into the marine mammal world, or anything that, for example, you have, like if you could go back, you would have done it somehow differently, or that, maybe engage in more field work, or study take complementary classes or something like that, or any advice for new students?
Well, I think first of all, you need to make sure that you have the drive, and I'll even say passion, to do it, because it is a highly competitive field and it's a lot of hard work. It's also very rewarding, but if you don't like all aspects of it, it's going to be very hard. So I would say you should not only love the field work, which most of us do, but also get to love your laptop and your data and your statistics. I don't think you can ever take too many statistics classes. It's so useful. And so just embrace all aspects of research, from data collection to publication and presentation. And I would also say don't dismiss an opportunity if it's not your ideal or your dream, because you never know what stepping stone it might be and what other doors it might open. And so for example, for me, I went to Texas A&M, and first of all entered a master's program with Randy Davis, and working on sea otters, which at the time were not my top species to study in marine mammal biology. But as I said, they ended up being a great species for studying marine mammal behavior. So I'm very grateful for that experience. And with Randy, I was able to develop my own research questions, to study territorial male behavior, which is very rewarding. And then I went on to then study what I really wanted to, what I thought I wanted to at first, which were dolphins, and of course worked with Barrett with the dusky dolphins. So I would say just don't dismiss any opportunities, because you never know. And even like I tell my own students, even if you do something and you don't like it, at least you're finding out what you don't like.
Yeah,
which is also really important.
it is for sure.
Yeah.
And it's quite important to, I think, and because as you know, I also I also deal with a lot of students, and it's a little bit this. People do have this idea of the magical part of working with the dolphins and whales, and it's not just that. It really isn't. It's more of 4 weeks on trying to put a tag and not being capable of than actually the 6 hours that you mentioned to get it on. And yeah, it sometimes can be quite frustrating. And of course, the field work, it's fascinating, but there is a big part of computer work, of researching, reading, writing, and of course, as you mentioned, the analysis part. Yeah, so definitely not all roses. It's not a sea of roses.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, and the final one, and I've been asking this, and it's really interesting, and I'm quite interesting. I think I know the answer already, but what are the people that most influenced you over your career so far, like your role models and like other scientists or not, that you really admire and that sort of got you where you are?
Yeah, well, I guess thinking about kind of childhood role models, I was really fascinated with the famous grade 8 scientists, Jane Goodall and Dianne Fossey. You know, I got to know their work more than some of the, like Jacques Cousteau was never really a childhood on my radar. And I think actually thinking about it, Dianne Fossey and Jane Goodall are both females. And so I think I had some good female role models that maybe inadvertently I sought out, from the start. And I mentioned my marine biology teacher in high school, Dr. Karen Stiles. And then jumping ahead to my PhD, I was very fortunate to be in the lab of Baron Versig, and taught me a lot about dolphin behavior and just, life in general. So I was very fortunate to be in his lab. And also I had a really, really great mentor and dear friend. I worked for a time at the University of Texas Medical Branch in Galveston. When I was doing my PhD, I had a part-time job there in women's health. And I had a very dear mentor, Dr. Carmen Radecki-Brykoff. She unfortunately passed away suddenly a couple of years ago, but she taught me a lot about science, but also, how to be a very ethical researcher, and was a really good role model of how to be a very successful professional female woman in the sciences. Nice. And then I guess the last person I'll mention is my mom. She was always a very strong female presence in my life that basically enabled me to do what I wanted to do to get where I am now. So I'm thankful for all of those people.
Yeah, definitely. It's very interesting because Jane Goodall and Dianne Fossey, obviously, I remember when I was a kid also seeing the videos, the National Geographic videos, and of course they were both women in the middle of the jungles with the animals, and it was really inspiring. Yeah, for sure, definitely two people that are extremely inspiring. Yeah, and of course in the marine mammal field, you have Bernard as well, as was your mentor, and others. Yeah, so that's really good. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And I must say, in the role models, I already said it, but you are also a role model to follow, and that I follow. So
thank you,
that's yeah. No, you are. You know, you are. Otherwise, I wouldn't have picked you. If I didn't pick you. You accept me. It's different. But
I think it was a little bit of both.
I think it was a little bit of both, yeah. And we have Bernard to thank for that, since he also pushed me into that direction. So yeah, definitely. You know, it's a pleasure to work with you and to know you and know your work, and of course have you as my main mentor at in this phase of my life, which is not an easy phase. So it's really good to have someone that is very supportive. And thank you so much, Heidi, for doing this for us. It was awesome, and I'm sure you know, people will very much appreciate you sharing your experience. We've been interviewing a lot of other scientists, and you are our first female, and yeah, but of course we'll have more females, and it's you know, it's very important to have your it's important to us to have you sharing your personal and professional experiences, obviously. So thank you so much for this. And yeah, guess that's it.
Yeah, well, thank you, Joanna. I think this is a wonderful series that you and AIMM are doing. And so thanks for the opportunity to chat. You're natural at this. And I think
maybe I'll change my career.
No, you've come too far. Well, it's up to you, but
yeah, no, I know. Thank you.
Yeah, but this has been really delightful, Joanna, and hopefully we'll see each other soon, you know, in Portugal, and be back together with the dolphins.
Yeah, very soon. Okay.
Yeah. All right.
Bye.
Okay. Bye, Joanna. Thank you.